So while we were gone, Bobicus is wondering what to do about this encounter. It seems like we were able to give you some good hints. Definitely, Bobicus, that's some creepy stuff. And if you want to make things super creepy, you could even try running some ideas past Derek, because Derek he prides himself, I think, on knowing a lot of horror things too. Pardon. And kind of like scientific research papers, it doesn't hurt to get some peer review on your plans. And you'll notice that one of the Tabaxi's legs is backwards. Hey, you could even try and play it up that maybe they think they're dealing with a Rakshasa at first, right? Because remember, their hands, Rakshasa hands are upside down. And then they learn the truth. Dun dun dun, dramatic chord. Sorry, I have a multi-grain chip in my teeth here. Yeah, you could make a 90-minute feature film on how to pour a glass of water. Very good reference to last night. Oh, you don't think your players know? Okay. Well, in that case, just surprise them with what you got. So, a little bit of lingering spice in that. By the way, for the record, if anyone else does enjoy salsa, this was tonight's little jar of salsa that I've been working on. I still have some in a bowl off to the side, but I wanted to get back to things here with you all. Is that coming through? Hopefully. They're the same people who made that black bean dip from last time. And then I think tomorrow I'm going to finally kill off the rest of my chi-cheese salsa, too. Alright. We're going to be approaching some dungeon creation from the point of view of a DM. We are definitely going to be considering PCs, though this is really going to be a DM-heavy leaning segment for what we're doing. Shadzar has pudding, and he's not afraid to use it. Which kind of pudding? Or puddin'? It's clearly tapioca, right, Shad? Come on, man, don't let me down. Butterscotch? This was a link that, Bobicus, did you share this one, or was it Bubonic? I know one of you shared this dungeon checklist about what suggestions for what every dungeon that you run should have inside of it. And they're not necessarily bad. I'm going to put, while it is down below in the links, if you want to read along while we're discussing dungeons, there it is. Ooh, Delcorin, that's good. Cinnamon raisin rice pudding. Ooh. Bobicus, this was you. Okay. Hey, a pudding is only for Harley Quinn. So I would suggest, hey, load this up on the side, review it, and let's think about these seven different aspects, which do make a lot of sense if you break down dungeons. Okay, I'm gonna minimize this for right now. One of them, 4 packs for $1. Well, it is very good advice. I keep things open-ended because not every dungeon has to follow it by rote. Will a lot of that show up in what we do? Yeah, in fact, maybe all 7 points are going to end up in there too. It is very well written. It is good advice for dungeon building. As you can see, we also have our DMG open on the side here. And this also has some very good dungeon advice and ways to randomly make dungeons. Especially here, a dungeon reflects its creators. Yeah, you can roll a random dungeon, but the dungeon served a purpose. It did something for people. People were doing things in here. People went out of their way to construct this dungeon for some reason. If you make a giant sprawling compound for cultists, and there's not, you know, kitchens or bedrooms or something, does that mean that they have living quarters elsewhere? Or every day did the high priest have to jump over a 15-foot deep spiked pit in order to get to the high altar and give his prayers to his gods? So think a little bit in those terms too, about why your dungeon exists. What is its raison d'etre? D'etre. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The raison d'etre. The reason it is. The reason it exists. What purpose did it serve? Who lived in here? Who lives currently in here? Tense can matter too. But there's all of this information here. Dungeon purpose, and death trap is one of them, right? You want to lure people to a false location and, you know, bleed off attackers and lure them in for something. It's a lair, a maze, a mine, a planar gate, all kinds of information. We're right around page 100, by the way, if you have your DMGs at home. You know, here's some sample stuff going on. Now, I don't have graph paper out, though we're still going to get... we're going to get some illustrations up and going here. It's a raisin diet tree. As well, I will add that if you're really in a pinch, you can come over here to Donjon, and this will make dungeons, right? And here's a random inn generator, a random dungeon generator. This is generic fantasy, AD&D, D20. There's Pathfinder, 4E, and then, I don't know, let's just go to, here's 5E. Random magic shop generator, interesting. Encounter, treasure. Do we not have a random dungeon? There we go. Here we go. We've just generated a dungeon. This is the Lair of the Lich Empress. And you can then go and say, no, I want it to be a 12 level dungeon. I am planning for this to be a party size of whatever. The motif of the dungeon. You can get detailed with it. And then it will generate. Let's say that we want a 4-layer dungeon. We have a party size of 5. Map style. Standard, classic, you know, whatever you want there. We will use squares. Rectangular, that's fine. Dungeon size. Let's have it be a larger dungeon. Yep, we'll have stairs. We could have many or like one set of stairs going up. Room layout, we can get all of this going, and let's make it. Let's construct. If you really are in a pinch and you want a challenge, look at this. We just made the Lair of the Lich Empress, and kind of like a random character, we can go through and connect the dots and make sure everything's in there. But look, here's traps. Here's just environmental effects. Right? So in C, a foul odor fills the corridor. Pardon me. So you find C. There's O, there's A. Alright, what's around here? Anyway, they get to C. There's E, V. And this can take, if you're not necessarily building for story, but you want a fun encounter, you want a challenge, or you have a group that, you know, you have a party that just says, let's just kick indoors and go wherever. This is a great way. You can pound through battle content and dungeon content, and you as a DM could be challenged to make a story out of this. Why is this the Lair of the Lich Empress? Can you flavor things? Here's some wandering monsters. Room descriptions. Someone scrawled, lightning comes before thunder, in a draconic script on the west wall. The floor is covered with humanoid bones. What does that mean? Have fun with it. Bubonic. Bubonic. It's look for donjon. And Shadzar says, "Oh, something you forgot to link you weeks ago when you're doing it in stream." Oh, Thieves' Cant. Oh, cool. Very cool, Shadzar. Thank you. Who here knew about the thunder? That's right. A party of 5, Kappa. There might be a grid sitting on MS Paint, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure either, Dark Wolf. I haven't played around with it in that case. There doesn't necessarily have to be for what we're doing. So the dungeon was a result of a lot of distilled information, right? We're DMs, we're thinking about what's going on. Well, we know for sure we're setting things in Mesotopia, which was the region that we've established, specifically in Kandor. Now, Kandor has its broad entry about the people who live there and what's happening. In our map-making session, we said, all right, let's breathe a little bit of life into Kandor specifically. So here's Kandor's information. It has this weird locale of a floating earth moat with a tower on it. Like, okay, sure, we'll get to that later. Let's develop the western seaboard and all this other stuff. And it just so happens that we did... Oh, that's my music player. It just so happens, right, when we were making Mesotopia, that here's Kandor in detail. And here we put this floating earth moat with a tower on it, but we went around and we filled in a lot of different things. And the people, and we're building the world piecemeal starting in this corner. Well, we've started in another corner, but anyway. And we looked at all of the other regions around, and from here, now that we've developed characters, right, we have, well, tonight we have 5 characters that we made. Not only do we have our 5-player characters that as DMs we should consider and account for, we also have these different regions, and these regions have different, well, a dungeon can be anywhere for almost anywhere for almost any reason. Though what would make for a really good spot that could challenge the characters that we've made so far. And if we look here at the interior lake / floating tower, right, it's this region right here. It is ruled over by a feared tyrant, so he's like the governor of this region, not of all of Kandor. A river divides the town, and so the town is located on kind of a swampy, maybe just above water level. It might be built on stilts or whatnot. It's known for gambling, okay. There is a new cult that is seeking converts. Whoa, you want to talk about reasons for a dungeon to exist, or how we can make enemies, or something along those lines? And then there's also a river ferry guided by a skeletal captain. Mind you, all of this was this was randomly done. And yet, look how well it works out. The story's writing itself. So here we have, as we were developing it, okay, so you have a floating rock. How do we get water into the interior of the region here if all the mountains are here? Yeah, we could say it just gets natural rainfall. Though it was interesting, right, if we have this floating rock, water comes in from, I don't know, somewhere. It's pouring out, and it's just over the centuries, it's created this lake that's flowed out into these streams. 6 technically, but the 2 come together here into a 5. Well, there's this strange skeletal captain that guides that guides someone or something. Maybe it's just a rumor. And so, in looking over where would be a really good place to put a dungeon for this campaign that we're going to manufacture that's taking place in the region? Well, in the northern expanse here, there's a wrecked ship, which might be nowhere near water. And so we actually put that nowhere near water here in the middle of a field. A large ship can be a dungeon as well. And also, dungeons don't have to be sprawling, acres big, Walmart-sized whatevers. They can be smaller. A dungeon could just be a couple, you know, like some rooms dug into a side of a hill, if you really wanted it to be. There is a permanent portal to another plane of existence in the Southern Plains right here. You know, maybe getting through the Tangle, if this is going to the Feywild and it's had an impact on the verdant parks and orchards. So this could be an orchard. So maybe just getting through a natural dungeon of navigating a hedge maze or through Fey trickery, things like that. That's there. You know, you have to get through the flooding, that kind of a thing. Also, we generated, there was a wishing well somewhere in the Eastern Mountains. And that is not this location, because there's also a grand temple. So the temple's in the mountains. Well, these islands are still a part of Kandor. Well, they're probably disputed, but Kandor will claim them. And we rolled, okay, so there's a wishing well in the mountains, and so let's put the wishing well out on an island. Why? I don't know. At the time, it's an exotic locale. If we're thinking as DMs, maybe we want our party members to go out to the islands for some reason. And this would be a good reason, or a good way to lure them out there, with promises of there being a wishing well. Hey, Steel Dust, yeah, welcome. It's been a little while, hasn't it? Yeah, welcome in. We've been talking language, and Canada, and French, and German, insults. We've been doing all sorts of stuff on the side, aside from making our fifth character now getting into a dungeon. But yeah, Steel, it's great to have you along for the ride. So again, randomly, this was all randomly generated, yet here we are. We're capable of weaving together these points to make a picture. Of all the points, a place that seemed to make a lot of sense, it's a central location, it has kind of some intrinsic mystery to it, is this location that has the actual regional feature of a floating piece of rock that has a tower on top of it. And so I sat down and I said, all right, let's make a dungeon out of here. I don't know where or how it'll fit ultimately into the campaign we're plotting, but I think we could make a really good dungeon out of this. In Canada, our language and diction tends to be quite cold. Oh, by the that does remind me, Steel Dust. Clark, Clark has made 4 pages of dad jokes to use as verbal components in Tasha's Hideous Laughter. And so he's been in sharing that, as well as sharing a little bit of wit and wisdom regarding Canada. Dogrim, did I use the DMG or another source? I did not use the DMG for what we're doing here. I brought it up in conversation. Because this does have great dungeon tips on ecology, on populating it. There's also random charts in here if you wanted to make a dungeon that way. But the dungeon that we're getting into tonight has been very purposely made just by our own, by what we've been doing ourselves here in the channel, and just doing some critical thinking. All right, so we chose this region of this part of Mesotopia. We have Mesotopia, we have the Kandor region, and specifically we focus in on the interior lake or the floating tower. Cool. Now we need to zoom in a little bit further. Well, as the tower made the lake beneath it that then spread out and flowed across the land out to the sea, the dungeon would need some kind of a name, especially if it's a regional feature. Well, let's call it Kandorfont, right? It's a fountain. It's providing fresh water to the interior of Kandor. Kandorfont sounds pretty straightforward. Your favorite Canadian joke is the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. Unfortunately, woo, that went over my my little like feathered, flaky bangs here, Steel Dust. When you're making a dungeon on your own, and the DMG will reinforce this as well, can you tell yourself, as the DM, in 1 or 2 sentences, why does the dungeon exist? Why is it here? Someone or something built it for a reason. Unless we're talking about natural caverns, but even then, caverns exist for a reason, because of the mineral structure, the water flow, various erosion features, and even, you know, if there's a population that's mining, or bugs or bats or other things that have various diets or acidities to saliva or, you know, waste products, that kind of a thing. They still exist for other reasons, just not in a constructed fashion. Hey, there's Clark. All right, almost as funny as the Ottawa Rough Riders. The summary of the dungeon, then, right? Because again, we're sitting down as DMs. We have 5 players, and we want to run them through this dungeon. We know, and this could be what our players find out. We know that this place is actually a desalination plant filtering seawater from the wishing well, from which this moat was raised and to which it is linked. It was created by a joint effort between blue and bronze dragons and the subsequent dragon born from them. And where did this idea come from? Well, let's look at our map, right? There's a wishing well right over here that's in a mountain range. Here we have a floating moat. In fact, I can kind of draw this out now. So we have a mountain that comes up, right? Oh, let me do it in a... Here we go. Here we have a mountain that comes up. Let's make a cut here. And not only is it a cut going that way, but we have a cut going down almost like a well. Now, flip this over, and what do you have? You have a floating rock with a tower on top of it, because that was the core of the well. Let's say that this well, I don't know, because this is at sea level. I mean, we can do whatever we want. So if the mountain's like really deep, but I don't know, let's say that the sea level actually would go this way. So something here is actually right here. And so the water is seawater. Something happens in this tower, and it comes out as fresh water. Then it pours down over the top of this mountain. As far as all the locals know, it's actually just a floating rock. Who put 2 and 2 together that it's actually a link out to the wishing well that's on the island? And then it's flowed over the land from there. And so now we have that's how I always make encounter locations. There will be logic applied to it, especially with its denizens. Yeah, and if you're, it'll make it seem natural to your players. In fact, it's odd, but it's one of the best compliments that your players can give you is not questioning why something exists. They accept it because it makes so much sense. Shadzar's talking about a Doritos chip or an Illuminati eye. So as I sat down, I said, all right, let's not even worry about a floor plan. We have to have this make some kind of sense. We know why. That's our pitch. We know why the dungeon exists, what it does. Our players are going to figure this out over the course of the dungeon. Now, what happened? Why is it a dungeon? Well, if we look back to what we had on our sheet, all right, not the dungeon or the Goblin Punch article, though we can keep this in mind. We know that the current calamity is there's a cult that's moved in that's seeking recruits. All right, so we have a cult. Now, how did a cult get into this floating rock, especially if you have a tyrannical governor who is enforcing the law, and this place is supposed to be reclusive or secretive in some way? You want logic in your game? How about this one? How much does a coin weigh? Yeah, I think Shadzar, I don't know if you were in earlier. If I recalled correctly, at least in the PHB, it was saying like 10 gold coins to a pound, and we were getting into, hey, yeah, you found a treasure chest with 1,000 gold coins in it. How you gonna haul 100 pounds of gold out? Yeah, who's really carrying 5,000 gold coins around? That's why you use gems. Oh, this is worth 500 gold? Love it. Put it in my pocket. All right, so what happened? Why is this place now a dungeon location? Well, the caretakers who lived in isolation were recently attacked by a Sahagin cult that figured out the link and came by sea. Almost all the caretakers were killed, as well as a good amount of the cultists. Many of the invaders were also killed by the locals and their defenses, and this is going to come into play later. Gems are for suckers. Use jewelry. It's worth more still. Well, because, right, it has gold and jewels. But you know what? If you're in a pinch and you need 500 gold in your pocket, that's easy to hide. You know, there you go. It's a 500 gold piece gem. And so here I was thinking, all right, this is what happened. Whoop, let's bring up paint. So here's our sea location, right? We had some Sahagin that maybe were swimming through the area. Maybe they're locals. They live in the sea. And one or more of them went and got sucked up into this. Or they studied it. They understood that it was a weird portal or something. And maybe a Sahagin cult. It doesn't even reflect the culture of the Sahagin in the greater sea area. They got together and they all raided. And they came in. And sure enough, they got sucked up into the intake here. And they're going to make their way down through the filtration or whatever here. People got mad when I calculated that residuum stuff for 4E. I added math to their game. Like the weight of residuum, or what? Like what were you? What do you? I guess level of detail were you putting in, Shadzar? And so here we go. It's a cult, and when we say cult, well, it's a human cult, right? No, this is a Sahagin cult, and this is especially, think about it from your player's aspect. They're going up into the sky to a rock that's producing water, fresh water at that. How are there Sahagin infesting this place? Well, that's a mystery, and that will hopefully keep your players going. Dorgrim says, logic with regards to the structure had a use. Things living there will not be some random collection of creatures that would not normally be living close by. I try to draw the love at real-world physics because my groups aren't wanting a task-works simulation. Yes. Uh-oh, Shadzar's getting real. Oh, yeah, geez. We're getting into the millimeter thickness and all of this. Well, all right, so if any of you want to check out Shadzar's link if you want a new level of detail for your campaigns. And so you have these Sahagin, these foreign people who have gotten together, and they realized the water's going somewhere. Maybe we need to follow the water. And they made their own cult in their own culture. And now this is what's setting the stage for the invasion. Because would Dragonborn living on a rock in the sky that's producing water expect a bunch of Sahagin to pour out of their filtration plant and just start, like, slaughtering left and right? You even assigned a specific gravity to the imaginary stuff. Oh, so that way if they wanted to, like, dilute it in water or something, or they wanted to, do something along those lines, you could give them that option. And then this led, again, we're thinking as DMs, what would our players think? Well, why can't people just fly up there? Well, the governor of the territory is very strict. Beyond any criminal penalties, or the fact that flight isn't very common, the dragons enabled defenses and trained their progeny to protect against airborne attacks. Any who did make it up there were dealt with harshly by the locals. Anti-scrying wards and other such defenses magically ward the floating island, so that rumors alone from flying passersby are all that's known, all that's taken back to society. Is it 100% catch-all? No, but it doesn't have to be. Flying isn't common, and they are prepared for those who do choose to fly. And in order to keep this facility secret, who's to say if dragons lifted this up into the sky and made this plant for whatever reason they made it, who's to say that they didn't have anti-scrying runes built into the stone, into the pipes, anything that's going on here? It's magic. But you're throwing out enough reasons that it's at least overcoming the initial what of your players, and it's seemingly making sense without you needing to get super specialized in this. Bobby says that shads are the other aspect of specie or hard currency is ease in trade and testing of quality. Now, another question that could come up in this case, how did the caretakers survive on this rock, right? We go back to the example of we have a temple in a jungle that is this, it is the high place of worship for this cult. Did the high priest and all the cult members have to jump over pits of poison spikes, or did they have to defeat rolling rock traps in order to get to their pews and sit down for Sunday service? Probably not. Like, why do things exist? What is going on here? So if you have people who've isolated themselves from society, how are they surviving? Yes, magic exists and magic can do that. Though, that kind of magic can be expensive. How else could this have been done? If they want to make a colony, if they want to make a culture away from everyone else. Well, let's give it an aquaponics facility. There's plenty of water coming through, and there's a way that we can explain how they're getting fish and seaweed before it becomes purified water. There's also, you can grow traditional crops and hydroponics, meaning you don't need soil to grow certain vegetables. There's also some wild game that might have been brought up and stocked in forests, and forests themselves are homes to specific vegetables, herbs, tubers, and mushrooms, as well as, it gives this wild game a place to live and operate. And now what you've done as we are building this dungeon is we have made a location here. So here's the top of a mountain, right? It's just upside down. We've put a tower, the wishing well, on top of it because it's just an upside down plug. And to give it a little bit of flair, we turned it into a fountain. So it has these 6 spouts at the top. Sorry, let me make this bigger. It has the 6 spouts here at the top, and it flows from the top of the plug into like a collection basin or into this first level. And then from there, it flows through tubes and it goes whoop up and out. And then it falls down to Kandor below into the lake that was carved out because of the centuries of water erosion. Well, we're getting into some very interesting economic discussions here between Babakis and Shadzar. There's a lot more discussion to it. I just did that math because someone was making a Dune-inspired campaign world called The Residuum Must Flow. And they actually mined for the magical dust. Yeah, 4E did weird stuff. If you just want to posit reason, Residuum wasn't a currency, that's why. Oh, people were making special brownies off of it, and people had systems for using the stuff to enhance spells, and had addiction and withdrawal to the stuff. There was a whole lot done with it. Yeah, I even had some custom stuff for Residuum as well. It was a very fun thing to play with. So here's our side view, right, of the floating rock. Remember, randomly generated, but look at what this has brought. Now we look at the top-down view, and it started right over here. Well, our caretakers need a place to live. Okay, let's add in some different houses and, some different styles. Kind of mix it up a little bit. Well, actually, first came the central tower and then the actual border of the rock. I started here and I said, all right, so what are they going to need? Well, maybe these are silos to store grains or other things. Well, this means that we're going to need to give them a place to farm. And let's put that somewhere else. But right now, this is where people live. What do they do with the bodies? Do they send bodies to the lake below to be found by the outsiders? No, they're probably burying them. So right next to the living area, I put a graveyard. And there's a mausoleum. What does the mausoleum have in it? I don't know. We can put something in there, though. There's opportunity in everything. And I figured, let's put a statue here. A statue to who? I don't know. We'll figure it out. Hey, you know what? Let's put one on the living side and one on the dead side. Ooh, that could be something. What? I don't know. Let's come back to it. And then we come over here, and there has been enough time that has passed that there have been many Dragonborn that have died. And so there's this large open space for the expectant future generations that now sadly will probably never come. Though to spice it up, there's a big burial mound right on the side. Maybe no markings, maybe there is. Maybe there's an entrance and it's a little like one-room barrow, or kind of like what pharaohs did with pyramids, and it's really just a chamber down into the middle and there's something. And I said, oh, you know what? We have blue and bronze dragons that help make this made this place. The dragons needed a place to be buried when they passed away. So boom, we have the location of a blue and a bronze dragon, like skeleton or a corpse or something along those lines. And so now we came in and said, all right, let's build our fields. This is where they grow things. And you know what? This is next. It's right in between these freshwater pipes. Let's pipe in some fresh water and have a hydroponics section too. Why does hydroponics exist in Get Ye Flask times? Because of magic, because of dragons, because this is a culture completely separated from the normal culture down below. All right, so they have that. Now they need trees to make repairs, to build things for wood, and to hunt game and to grow other food sources. So we'll have the forest next to the fields. Bada boom, there we go. Some coniferous, some deciduous, and the other dragon went here on the edge. It seemed to make sense. Kind of opposite from here, not necessarily, but does that really matter? And lastly, over here, this is a saltwater pipe coming off of the tower, and this is their aquaponics facility. So the raw seawater's coming in, something is happening where it's being diverted into aquaponics, and it's here that the protectors, the citizens, the denizens, the dragonborn, whatever you want to call them, scoop up all the fish and crabs and seaweed and other things that get swept up, like all the edible stuff that's, pardon me, swept up by the this magical pump, and they use that to supplement their diets, and also to help purify the water before whatever the process inside the tower takes. Again, it's all making sense. We have an ecosystem now. All right, so my hand was going off. We have an entire ecosystem on this little island that has a magical connection. So boom, there it is in profile. Here it is from a bird's eye view. Let me get back to... Hey, no problem, Dorgrim. If you want to take any of the ideas we do in here, have fun with them. Make them work. Modify them to whatever works in your campaign. So it's like the Yawning Portal Inn. Oh, actually, Residuum is a terrible currency for another reason. It has high use value. Ergo, the drug relation. Wizards wanted the stuff and other people wanting to sell it. Bauka says if there was a lot of reason to cast spells, the value of Residuum would go through a huge depression. Yeah, the first vial is free to level 1 characters. After that, it costs more and more. That's right, the first taste is always free. Yeah, it got crazy. Its commodity value outweighed its fiat value. Yep. And by the way, remember, you're playing D&D, you're going to get an associate's degree in economics, just from playing D&D. No, that's just today, how we're off the gold standard. But in the D&D verse, money was still something, people wanting it because it was made from something worth something. Yeah, copper, silver, gold. In the Dragonlance series, steel was the most valuable metal because you could use steel to make armor and weapons and other things. It was extremely useful, extremely sought after, and so steel pieces were like the gold pieces. The shiny shows wealth status from having shiny objects, yes. So now, we needed to go and we needed to say, all right, somehow, and if you've been following along, you might know how, but somehow our players are going to have to get up to our dungeon. That in itself, it can be a great sit-down adventure, because they're going to have to figure out a way to do that. Hint, it's probably something along the lines of that skeletal boat captain. Wink. Maybe the skeletal boat captain, after they find him and they make some, some mysterious encounters, or even physical encounters, they find the boat captain, who's probably a dragonborn skeleton. Wink. He'll take them from the city in the swamp, wink, over the lake, and maybe we have some role-playing, some chat or whatever, and then, because of supernatural reasons, he can ride one of the waterfalls up. All of a sudden, wait a minute, we have a pump or an outlet here that has these 2 interesting statues that are flanking it. What if these are a beacon? What if this skeletal captain is related to this place in some way? So here we have the players go whoop, and now they're up on the platform, and this skeletal captain, which other people don't know that he could come up here because maybe he's just he's a local legend. People just say, oh yeah, you see him on foggy nights, he paddles around the lake, whoopity-doo. Well, you made that an adventure in itself for your players to go and make contact with. Sure enough, this skeleton exists, you strike a deal, maybe you have to pass some sort of test or morality test, or even because there's a cult attacking his brethren who are still alive, wink, he comes and tries to find people in some fashion. After the players prove themselves in some way, then he'll take them up here. Boom. We've now justified why these statues exist. It adds a little flair, and then they're dropped off. You could drop them off on the resident side, on the graveyard side, whatever you want. There's trees, there's squirrels. We'll bless them all. Silver is the only thing that can harm a vampire or werewolf unless it's a magic weapon, or cold iron. Yeah, I think cold iron was more for Fae, wasn't it? And then silver was for shapeshifters. I don't know about vampires. But, I don't know, there's so many different myths around it. Alright, so, we have this. We have a mini adventure to get our players incorporating the flavor of the region that, yes, we randomly rolled, but we're using it, and yet it still makes sense. It still flows. Your players are gonna be into this. Yeah, he gets for snickered. By the way, Shadzar, there's this new thing going around. The ladies love it. I'll tell you all about it. So now they're up here, and what do your players do? Well, your players are probably going to want to investigate. They might want to bonk some cultists, find out what's going on, because the ferryman's not even alive, let alone probably saw what happened. He's a supernatural agent of some kind. And so now it's time to have your approach to the dungeon, which is kind of a part of the dungeon itself, right? We're confined. If this ferryman leaves, the only way down is a really big water slide with a hard impact at the end. So, something's going to have to get done in order to resolve this, to get the ferryman to come back or something. And so you can put a token at the end of the dungeon, like the skeleton says, bring back the crystal valve or something, and then I'll know that you've been to the center. You don't worship Moyle, but you go right ahead. And now you need to plan, okay, what's happening where? We're going to be telling a story with what we present and what we don't present. So here we go. So we remember, we're keeping this shape in mind here. Now let's break it down by region, which also for your players to draw this on a map, on a dry erase board, this makes it super easy to remember. Oh, that's the graveyard. Oh, that's the farm area. You can give them fancy names if you want, but it's going to be a lot easier. And by the way, we made a ranger that because of her time spent in these swamps, let me go up to her here. Ceylin, this was all RP done before. Because of her time spent in the swamps, where she met undead, these were undead dragons, and that taught her, boom, ancient Draconic. Not just Draconic, but like we're going back to like the core, the mother tongue of Draconic. Not before it kind of became diluted and bastardized by all these other languages. We were weaving our characters' strengths and their backgrounds into the dungeon to be able to give them opportunities to play their characters and let them shine. The character we just randomly generated tonight is a knowledge cleric who does stuff with undead. Hey, there's a graveyard. And she can speak Draconic, but she can use her channel divinity if she didn't want to turn undead to perhaps gain knowledge or proficiency about this, or to somehow make interactions to solve riddles and traps and to go through here. Yeah, the graveyard's name is Jeff. And if you as my players can't respect the fact that I spent an hour making names for every tombstone in Jeff, and you do not call Jeff by its name, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, and you will not be a part of my campaign further. Thank you. All right, bada boom. Now, the main entrance to the tower is going to be locked. That you can put a big, obvious neon sign that says entrance here if you really want. It's going to be locked, and there's going to be a reason for it, because there should be a reason for it. This means that your players are going to say, how do we get in here? How do we climb up an impossibly, like a magically created slick stone surface that has water pouring down it and mists and wind blowing around? There's got to be another way in. Well, what's connected? Well, we're not going to go in through these sewer pipes, so to speak, that are gushing water 24/7. Oh, look at this. There's a facility that's connected to the tower, yet that facility isn't gushing water, or at least not obviously. In fact, it must have some kind of a return, because if water's going out, why isn't it also spilling out? Why isn't it like a spill through instead of a return? So we have to think of these things. So for sure, if your players are keen and they want to rush the dungeon, you get one zone here that you get to set the tone. That zone is going to be the aquaponics area. So that's so draw it out. Draw a mini map. What bullet point? Why does this exist? What is happening? What do I want to have happen here? So this is access to the interior. We're going to have a monster fight to proceed, because this is going to help tell the tale of what happened. And also, this is providing access for more Sahagin to come in. That means that we cast 3 spells, we can't take an 8-hour rest up here. More Sahagin are coming through. In fact, you could probably even say when they enter the area, and you could describe, oh, they grow oysters here, or oh, they have seaweed, or oh, this is fish. I don't know. Research aquaponics. Watch some YouTube videos. Show off your DM capabilities if you wish. But the main pool, like the separating pool here, that comes from the source, a great ways away, the main pool has all kinds of things in it. Well, suddenly they look down into the water to see what's there, and several Sahagin pop out. And maybe one of them actually has a big tentacle or something wrap around him, and he gets sucked back into the water. So now there's tension. Not only do we face cultist Sahagins that are coming through, but there's something in the water that doesn't even care about the cultists. And so now we have a fight, but it's a fight with a story purpose. They'll probably dispatch the cultists. Don't look to punish them in the very first introduction to the dungeon. And then they're going to have to fight some kind of a big monster. Like, I don't know if you want to make it a kraken or an aboleth, but maybe it's a giant octopus or several or something along those lines. But that's the gateway in. You've established something's wrong. You've established that this is their way in, and you've given a little bit of culture into what's happening. How do these people live and eat? Oh yeah, so they grow stuff here. Cool, that makes sense, DM. But let's get into the interior of the tower. I'm not here to dilly-dally. Some parties will do that, and you should account for it. Other parties are going to want to search every nook and cranny. Do you need to generate content for every nook and cranny? No. Though you can certainly provide guidelines, a synopsis of what they find in each of the regions. All right, so for sure, you need to have certain details here to set your tone. Well, let's go to the graveyard, right? Here's the little mini-map section. So, when the Sahagin started pouring out, they came here and they started raising dead to help sack the locals. And some of these undead are still prowling. Which means that you can have, if you want them to be random encounters, you can have random encounters. Do you want it to be, they step off the skeletal captain's boat, and sure enough, there's a fight waiting for them? Sure, it's a predestined encounter. Why are there undead wandering around? Well, that's a good reason. That should create a question in your players' minds, and therefore they might investigate it and learn, oh, cultists, right, they worship gods. Gods grant gifts and can bring people back from the dead or make undead. And also, these undead served a specific purpose. They helped the dead of their own villagers attack the villagers to kill them off or drive them out so that the cult could take residence. So, we then also have more clues about the culture and history. Right? We have names and maybe dates. We have linguistic patterns or runes. maybe there's even some treasure bits if you have characters who want to grave rob. I don't know. You know, if we're making a generic dungeon for like a mod we want to sell, you should account for an evil party wanting to play. But you can add culture and history, right? These are timelines. These are deaths. These were people. This is also where the mound of the Blue Dragon founder is. It may be fancy, it may not. Does someone want to see the bones of a dragon? Well, there they are under the mound. And maybe the Sahagin tried to raise the dragon bones, but they weren't successful. Maybe they were, and we actually have a Dracolich or a dragon zombie. You know, maybe it can't get out of the mound because it's too big, but maybe they actually animated it. You can add all kinds of details like that here. And we're talking about one zone. So we also had this mausoleum. Who's in there? Wait. So you could just put in something random. Wait, all of these are humans? Where did humans come into the mix? And then you think, all right, we have dragons that are buried up here. And then we have a bunch of humans that no longer exist. Pineapple pen. Pineapple pen. Got it. This is why Dragonborn exist. Some birds and bees happened up here. And again, we're telling the tale of culture and biology and history. And all through gravestones, all through some deductive logic by just planting a couple little seeds, even in a graveyard. Oh, geez, look at you, Shadzar. You've been on a roll with battles. So they explore here. They face encounters of some kind, put down some skeletons. And remember, if you're having battles, the concept of the dungeon is this is going to be a one-shot. They're not going to get to take an hour rest, because if they do, maybe every half hour several more Sahagin pop out. How can you rest if there's enemies lurking around? You know, random skeletons, random Sahagin, other things that we're going to explore. So you want to stress that you're against a time limit, because you've entered, and now you're going to have other people entering behind you, and of course you have the people ahead of you, who already cut their teeth in battle, and they've already bloodied their tridents or their whatevers. Alright, so let's go to another zone here, right? Let's go to the village, right? Here's the graveyard, here's the village. So here, there's definitely evidence of fighting going on. Probably not fire, or if there is fire, you know, why would Sahagin use it? But you can say, yeah, all of these houses are made, maybe they made them Japanese style. It's all paper and wood because of the forest and their own abilities to, like, pulp things. There's a lot of water. You know, if you have Dragonborns that have acid breath, there's this acid to help break stuff down. There's utility uses for this stuff. But anyway, there's evidence of a fight. And maybe there's even a couple undead still shambling around. So if they haven't been to the graveyard, this is going to give them a clue. If they've already been to the graveyard, they know, they can see, oh, wow, this is how they were used. And they're probably going to get their first taste of cultists, as there's a couple that are still sneaking around too. If the party's immoral, they might want to go in and loot some houses. In a society like this, there might not necessarily be coins, as Shadzar and Babicus were talking above, but there could still be valuable things. Dragon teeth, dragon scales, different bones, pieces of art that have been carved out of stone or wood or things along those lines. And then also, you could reinforce your concept of what dragon culture, dragonborn culture is, especially if you break them down into blue and bronze, which by the book are the two, like, the seafaring, or they like to live around water dragons. So, hey, they kind of got together and made this place. Got it. So, this is your village encounter. Do you have to draw out every house? No. Just describe it. You know, it's a small village of maybe 100 people. And go from there. Shadzar is now a vampire were-rat mimic. Who can defeat you? Oh, yeah, you have been that. I mean, I'm probably like CR42. You eat liches for breakfast. I don't know. You can always try going through a random epic, because I think you can get an archlich as an enemy there. And we'll see what happens. Hey, it's good to see you in here. Am I into Warhammer? I did play 40k for a while, and I had a Tyranid army. I know the lore of 40k pretty well, though not the past, like, Codex Splat editions. For fantasy, I know it generally, but I'm familiar with the product. So if you want to speak that lingo, then I can pick up probably at least half of what you're talking about. I don't know if Rowmonger's still here, but Rowmonger knows a ton about Warhammer too. So let's look at the forest biome, for lack of a better term, right in between these pipes. What do we want our players to discover in the forest of this dungeon? Well, there's no cultists, because why would the Sahagin, go in here? No one lives here, and it's not obvious. There's the wildlife in here would be neutral towards them. I don't know. Did they bring up bears and wolves? Did they bring up deer? Did they bring up dire badgers? I don't know. But wildlife tends to be neutral, though you can introduce something like a myconid colony. Myconids are kind of humanoid fungus. Pardon me. They are sentient. Now, do we want these ones to be sentient? Maybe it's just like a big mushroom farm, and they're not sentient, and it's like, I don't know, shriek shrooms or something, like screaming fungus. But if you wanted, you could introduce... Alright, so some myconids were brought up, and they may not be able to talk too much, or they may not be the brightest, but if they're treated well, you might be able to get some information from the myconids about what happened and when, albeit from the perspective of a sentient fungus person. However, if you have the bad party members or aggressive party members, and they see something out of The Last of Us walking around the forest and they attack, the myconids would make an encounter themselves, because the colony would rally because they're under attack, and the party would have to fend them off or run away. And then we also have the Mound of the Bronze Dragon Founder. And so maybe this one, it's not in the graveyard, it wasn't easy to access, so maybe this one wasn't possibly made to be undead. I don't know, it's up to you. Nah, just wondering, this design looks pretty cool. Do you always draw out your campaigns like this? Yes and no, Hui. It depends on the circumstance. For what I'm doing here with you all, as I'm going through the process of building a dungeon and conceptualizing things, and like taking a paintbrush and going and putting a bunch of dots on canvas randomly, kind of like the shotgun approach, and then how do we connect the dots to make a beautiful picture from the randomness and the chaos. So this is our forest encounter, if our players even go there. Do they have to? No. Would they get something if they did? Yeah. Could they get attacked as something? Yes. Alright, now let's look at the fields. So the fields were located over here, right? Alright. We can plant a clue that there are dead cultists. And as you describe it, you say, as you're walking up to the field, you see that there are several dead fish creatures, like what you fought on your way. Or actually, even if they haven't reached the aquaponics, this would be their first encounter with Sahagin. So, by the way, there we go. It's still a clue either way, and you want to give multiple paths to the same point. They see these dead fish people, and one of your druid might say, "Oh, I've heard of burying a fish with a kernel of corn to grow it better," but this, however, but there's these dead Sahagin cultists, but there's no evidence of what is around them to have killed them. If that doesn't warn the party to, hey, you might not want to explore here, or it's a challenge, and they say, "Oh, we should explore here and find out what killed everyone," right? It's like that thing where you're like, "Oh, this smells. Oh, smell this." And reflexively, you're like, "Oh, that smells. Why did I smell this?" A bunch of dead bodies. Let's go in and find out what killed them. Well, here we can make a part of the culture come alive, somewhat literally, because maybe set in the fields of this rather xenophobic or isolationist tribe of Dragonborn are scarecrows, right? They detect non-Dragonborn in the fields, they come alive, and they take care of the problem. Especially, if any flying intruder said, "Oh, hey, I'm just going to land in the remote fields across, like, the furthest distance from the village so I don't get attacked." Hey, look at this. Look at this. They're still going to get murdered out here. And if it's not by scarecrows, what if there's clay golems or rock golems that come up out of the ground and will, like, crush non-Dragonborn, or specifically non-their type of Dragonborn? Or you could even, instead of calling them dragonborn, maybe they're half dragons, right? If we have pineapples and pens representing humans and dragons, maybe they're not necessarily dragonborn, but they're actually half dragons. And yes, Dark Wolf, they would have tails in that case, and even wings. Anyway, and so there's these auto defenses that are a natural part of the ecology here. And you can even put a shambling mound. What's a shambling mound but a compost heap? It's a living one, but it's a compost heap. Again, it plays into the terrain. It plays into what's naturally around. What did... looks like it got cut off at the end. Hang on one second. I have my papers here, too. Okay. Something else you can leave as a clue. I'm sorry it got cut off in the picture down here. Like some water clues. So we see here. So these are intakes coming off of the freshwater discharge. This is a saltwater discharge and possibly even a reclamation of saltwater coming back from the aquaponics facility. And so water's coming out for the hydroponics here. You can plant clues on the Sahagin that maybe they were carrying pouches on them and there's residue of salt. Now, salt and fields, you're like, whoa, the Sahagin came all the way up here to salt the dragon's fields? That doesn't make sense. Why is the salt empty? Salt is a precious commodity. Yet, you don't see it anywhere. You've just seen some little bit of residue. Why were the Sahagin carrying bags of salt? Why is the salt empty? It's not in the ground in the fields. It's not in a nice, crockery on a shelf in the village. What happened to the salt? What happened to the salt indeed? Now we've set up a little mini mystery. Because this is then also going to get your characters thinking again. Wait a second. If salt water's coming in and fresh water's going out... Question mark, question mark, question mark. Profit. Wait, what? What happened to the salt? Now we get to the tower itself, right? Salt water goes there and comes back. Fresh water goes out. And here's the entrance. The entrance is magically locked. Cultists stole the key from the chief, which you could leave as a clue in the village. Maybe it's in the biggest house. It looks like the place was ransacked. There's a very important coffer that's been opened. It has a nice velvet lining with a special outline shape in it. The thing is gone. Well, the head of the cultists went to see the chief, probably killed the chief. In fact, the chief might have even been, strewn over the coffer. Took this important thing, went in the central tower, and cut off anyone following him, because that's what a cultist would do. And again, this is leveraging your players to be creative and say, how can we get into the tower? How can we fight against the raging currents of fresh water flowing out? Well, there's a cycle that has salt water going back in, and not nearly not nearly as torrential a pipe. Aha. Oh, hey, Delcorin's exploring forests, speaking of which. And by exploring forest, I mean a mad dryad. So he was resting against a tree, and a dryad popped out, and she's looking like a dryad would. And he's like, oh, hey, what's going... And he ends up getting his head squished. So, yeah. Poor Del. All right, so again, we're planting clues. We're building. If your players are paying attention, they're going to piece together this is what happened. So the only other way in is through the aquaponics. Also, as they get close to the tower, they can see that there are gargoyles, or at least mechanically gargoyles from the monster manual. But maybe they look like drakes or some other lesser dragons. Maybe they look like dragons. Maybe they look like half dragons. I don't know. You're the DM. You tell me. But this is part of their aerial defense. Someone comes flying too close to the island. The gargoyles come alive and swarm the victim and then return and go back into place. So not only are you getting architecture and culture and clues about what's going on and how this place fits in the world, it also is going to warn your players you might not want to levitate or cast a cheaty levitate or fly magic around here. Did I say cheaty magic? I shouldn't have said cheaty magic. By the way, no cheaty magic. And especially stuff like shape stone. Oh, nay, nay. Why, those wards that prevent scrying? Why would anyone want to allow their stonework pipes and sewers, or whatever you want to call them, to be allowed to just have some person come up and cast shape stone and pop a hole in the waterworks? Oh no, these sort of spells are warded against specifically. So my players, my lovely players, no cheaty magic. Wink. Oh yeah, so it's warded against stone shape. It could be warded against ethereal travel, teleportation, things like that. You know, you as a DM can use that as a catch-all. You know, if your players are kind of munchkining their way through, with teleports or going ethereal or, meld into stone or all this other stuff. This place is already a magical location filled with dragons and the offspring of dragons. They're going to realize, this isn't their first walk in the, whatever, it's not their first ball game or whatever the expression is, and not their first rodeo. They're going to not want people to just be able to come up and cast spells to either visit them or to mess up everything they have going for themselves. Delcorn flips all of his tables, goes into his neighbor's house, and flips their tables as well. Aw. Sorry, Del. All right, so we've conceptualized every area, and we don't need, 20 pages in a hardbound manual for this. This is one 8.5 by 11 computer paper that we've filled out, and this is enough. Like, if you want to make notes on monsters in the margins, go ahead and do so. And you've just run in meeting the skeletal captain, in journeying out to here, and then exploring these zones. It could be one session, but you have probably a couple sessions worth of content here, and they're not even inside the dang old tower yet. Right? So they are definitely going to have, even if they want to speed run this dungeon, they're going to have a physical encounter with a couple Sahagin that pop out to establish the pressing time and to give a clue about what's going on. And they're going to have this kind of sub-boss monster, this giant squid or octopus that got sucked up also. Okay, where do we go from here? Well, do we need a bunch of graph paper? Not necessarily. You can still draw it out like this, and then you can put it on graph paper later. But now, after having set the tone in the scene with you all, I wanted to get your all's input on how you think this dungeon should play out. So let's say then they figure out, okay, we go through aquaponics, we put down the giant squid, and we get sucked, we either turn a valve off and we crawl through, shimmy through. Maybe you make it like a big city sewer pipe that has a little grating on the sides that they can walk on. Whatever you want, that doesn't really matter. Unless if you want it to be claustrophobic, they have to crawl through the pipe like Bishop and Aliens. I don't know if you've seen that movie. If that doesn't make sense, then it's a very claustrophobic crawl. Or you can have them walk. Change it. I could publish this and say that it's a walk down a corridor, and you could just say, no, I want this to be scarier. So they come in here, and it so happens that there's a sample tank that kind of splits off, and so they find themselves going through here, and they're in a tank that has air above it. If you even want them sucked in and you want them holding their breath, you don't even want claustrophobia, you want the fear of drowning in your players to raise the tension, that's a good place to do it. I guess I should go this way. My monitors are... Anyway. So they come out, they're spluttering, they're wet or whatever, and they drop out, and sure enough, not only does that happen... Ooh. It's Clark. I officially have a new favorite card in Hearthstone. What is the card, Clark, and why is it your favorite? Is it a Sahagin card or a Murloc card because they make fun noises? But they see And maybe they're stealthy about it, right? Think about it. We have a big stone chamber with water flowing through pipes. As an environmental condition in here, there could or could not be light, and I would say at least give disadvantage on hearing-based perception checks, which means that your players might be able to sort of birth themselves into the first floor of the tower and not necessarily be noticed by the Sahagin guards, the cult guards that were left behind by the front door by the leader. And so if they're even halfway stealthy, because of the disadvantage on perception for auditory, then they might be able to creep around. Maybe these pipes aren't on the floor; they could be suspended. Maybe they are in the floor, and it's a little bump, and so your characters can sort of hide, like they can treat them like a chest high wall, like in Gears of War or something, and they can strafe. Now going over them isn't necessarily difficult, but it's a bump. It's a big bump. And so now we're going to have a conflict, or not, with these Sahagin guards that are by the door. Here's another conflict. Is this one going to, kick their butts? Hopefully not, because again, unless you're doing something differently, we're planning for this dungeon to be a one-shot. You don't have time to wait an hour, let alone 8, to recharge your level 3 spell that you cast. You can't be topped off the whole time. Use your wits, use your resources, and... Oh, hey, Dorgrim, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you subscribing to YouTube. That's so cool of you. And you'll find this video up on here. If you miss anything here, it'll be up tomorrow. So anyway, are they going to have an encounter? Are they bloodthirsty? Or do they just see that, hey, they're Sahagin, we're going to put them down? Okay. And you know what this can do? Maybe this can do it. And this is up to you as a DM. You can say, oh, there's a... Oh, thank you, Dark Wolf. Thank you for the host. You can say, all right, well, now that you've secured here, maybe there's a lever on the inside that releases the door. So now they can get in and out easily should they somehow find the need to do so. That's up to you. Do you want that as like a shortcut safety valve? Or if they want to escape, are you going to have them crawl into this other bin here and go thwomp, like a pneumatic tube into the facility again? If you keep it that way, that's going to commit them to being inside this place, because are they going to want to go through all that again? Especially if other Sahagin are being drawn up out of whatever this central pillar is, and also being shot through the tube, let alone giant octopi or other things like that. A shark? I don't know. Probably not. So, do you want escalation? Do you want tension? Once you're in, we're ratcheting things forward. There's no going back. Are they beginners, or do you want to make it, so that they can access the outside again? Boom, here's your release valve. It's natural either way. Your players aren't going to know the difference. You're the DM. You're running the dungeon. You've created it. And they're going to think, wow, that's cool, and that still makes sense. Clark says, Lyra the Sun Shard. Every time you cast a spell, it adds a priest spell to your hand. So I imagine that's the theme of your deck, Clark. Unfortunately, I don't play Hearthstone. I have some friends that do. Though, to me personally, you're speaking French. Was it? J'ai seulement compris français un peu. I probably did not pronounce that correctly, but I tried my best from what I remember from high school. Now, from here, I don't know, this could be big and empty, or like empty of specific features. Obviously, this level has the pipes that go out. And it's also showing that, and by the way, when I say go out, I mean from the bottom of the fountain, right here, right? You've entered this area that the tower or the upside-down plug is spilling water into from the top, and then something is happening, and then it's coming out through here. Yeah. Hui says, omelette du fromage? Omelette du fromage. Omelette du fromage? Omelette du fromage. And even that in Dexter's laboratory was incorrect despite him trying to learn French, because it should be omelette au fromage. Unless for some reason the omelette was from a place called fromage. Then it's the omelette from fromage. The omelette from cheese instead of cheese. Or with cheese. I'm sorry. All. AU is with. Au jus. I get au jus with my French dip at Arby's. Nom 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 nom. Now, this is going to build, right? So we've done all the prep work. We've done the prep work in the world that we know. We take a journey into the unknown with this skeletal captain. Through supernatural measures, we get floated up to the top. And now we're in the world of the unknown. We're exploring that. And now we're in this confined space with cultists and possibly even more of them behind us. There's a couple things that we're going to want to make sure that we do in here. We know that we're starting on level 1. We have a level 2. Level 3. Level 4. And then we finally reach, I don't know if we want to call it like level 5 or the plug, or because it's a tower, the tip, the spire, something along those lines. So we have the plug or the spire. I guess the plug would be more if it was going down. We'll call it the spire. And we can set goals for each one of these levels. So far, let's check on our checklist of dungeon features. Something to steal, plenty. Something to be killed, plenty. Something to kill you, plenty. Different paths, we got there. Someone to talk to? Yes and no. There hasn't necessarily been someone to talk to yet. And that, unless they have, I don't know, speak with dead or something along those lines to get clues. But that's not necessarily someone. This is something that we can provide later in the dungeon. Maybe there is a survivor. Maybe the chieftain was killed, but his wife was taken hostage by the Sahagin priest of this cult. Maybe a couple other Dragonborn tried to, come in and save him or were hauled in. And you find a couple dead or dying bodies who can give you some last words. Beware the blarg. Or someone who is coherent but is just too injured to move, right? Broken legs, stuff like that. It's an NPC, and he's going to take a lot of party resources to bring up, which if they want to dump resources into a villager NPC, hey, that's fine, and he can roll with them because he doesn't want these Sahagin in here. I mean, not that he wants the players in here, but he'll take the help getting the Sahagin out. But we can put number 5 somewhere inside here to add a point of interest and to keep your players motivated and going. And also to stimulate their brains and not just their swinging arms. So here's a couple suggestions too. This is a good website for that. There's a rival adventuring problem. Goblins never need explanation. This one is kind of interesting. There's a ghoul head sitting on a shelf. It can talk if you blow through its neck hole, right? If it's just a head, it can move its muscles a bit. But where's it getting air to speak? Well, someone's going to have to blow air through it. Clark says, my main class is priest, and having a card that gives me infinite spells in my class is awesome. Ooh, I'd agree. I imagine, was this like a super rare pull for you, Clark? Something to experiment with. We've done this before. We have sort of the waterworks on the outside. Maybe you've even put in some puzzles. But you can put inside this tower even more. Like, you had some simple stuff. You had beginner puzzles, logic puzzles. Think of, like, I don't know, Resident Evil, Silent Hill stuff maybe on the outside. Now on the inside it gets tougher. Maybe there's riddles or logic or other, like, word puzzles, word play. And especially if you have this character that has Ancient Draconic, that could give you an advantage or even allow for some of this stuff to be done. Because, number 7, something your players will probably will not find. In this case, if we hid riddles or content behind the Ancient Draconic language, which is the Old Dutch that these Amish are speaking, again, put these in terms that that are easier to understand. If they're speaking the Old Dutch that these Amish are speaking, maybe any other party running this who doesn't have that access wouldn't be able to understand this riddle and therefore access the I don't know, the crystal valve that the boat captain had asked for. Now, that said, and we want to go about multiple paths, they should have a way down that doesn't involve fetching this particular item. The particular item, though, will probably get them a favor from this supernatural entity that could be major. Well worth, if they didn't want to just pocket it and find the other way down and sell it at market, they could give it in exchange for goodwill to this I don't want to say benevolent undead, but to this concerned supernatural party, and get a favor. But would they ever have found this if they couldn't read the language? Yeah, there's the comp language spell, and that could have come in handy. Or it could have been behind something else. But every dungeon should have some like super secret to it in order to make it a little spicy. Hui says, these are neat websites you check out. Have you thought about making a bookmark list of other people? Hui, scroll down on the front page of Twitch, of this Twitch channel. I mean, I'll reduce down into a little rectangle for you, but look at the links that I've provided for you down below. Now, this is our, like, intro to real dungeon. The spire is going to be fight with the cult leader. Lyra gives more shots at getting the combo quicker, and doing the combo itself will get me more spells if, for whatever reason, the opponent has a counter to the one-turn kill. Oh, and it was a legendary card at that. Rarest possible drop in the game outside of cosmetics. Wow, nice. Does this mean you're going to be competing in tournaments, Clark? If so, hey, if you're making your way up the tournament ladder, let us know how that's going for you. Gotcha. Are these all sites I use to make my games? Some are sites that other people have shared. For instance, Bobicus shared that dungeon site. It's something that I didn't know before. Before I was making dungeons. I didn't have something as explicitly written as that, but I would look in the DMG and some other resources and just go off of my campaign world that I carry in my noggin. Some sites I have used as reference, and others, there was a concept that I knew, but I didn't want to write it up, or I couldn't write it up, or it was just easier if I put a link for you all to then say, oh, gotcha, this is how it's done. And so Hui, also make sure to look at the other, like the YouTube links. Also, you're going to find some cool how-tos and some other things as a DM through those, and as a player too, through those YouTube links. And even the Twitch links are a lot of fun and can lead to some fun and enlightenment. Clark says, no, I'm garbage at that game. I got lucky with a pack. So what you should do, Clark, monetize it and dust that card, but make sure you record it for YouTube, put it on YouTube, and get 1 million views, and be able to buy 100 packs or whatever, and get it again and do it again. You know, Crazy Canadian dusts legendary card in Hearthstone. You know, not only will it be the most viewed, you'll get so much like anger, and that's going to help it spread even further throughout the Hearthstone community. Why would you dust a legendary? Some of the guys in the card store do that with Magic. They call it a hardcore pack war. And if you lose a card in that game of like you open a card, you don't need to pay the mana cost, but you can play it. If your card goes to the graveyard, you have to rip it in half, no matter what card it is. There have been some Planeswalkers that have been ripped in half, and some other cards too. You want to talk about a way to build honor with your friends? A hardcore pack war is the way to go. You mean it's not like it's uncommon? Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you're talking this is the rarest card. Like, you got the golden ticket to visit the chocolate factory, Clark, and here I am. I'm like, you're just going to rip it in half on national news, and you do it regularly if it's something otherwise useless. Oh, got it. Okay. So we have the fight with the cult leader. Maybe is this a hostage situation? At some point along the way, probably just inside, we should speak with a survivor. Or survivors, plural. There doesn't even really have to be anything else. This doesn't have to be, you know, an entire, like, Sam's Club or Costco or Walmart-sized floor to a tower. This could be a small tower. I mean, small in that scale, right? What if it's just, like, 25 feet and then, like, another 15 and another 25 feet? Something along those lines. Remember the environmental factors. We have water gushing around on the inside and outside. Is there a floor, probably closer to the top, where we're considered to be deafened? Is there a floor where we're at, well, I guess we're already at disadvantage, or maybe on the very bottom floor here, you're not at disadvantage on those checks. But maybe as we get up closer to the source of the water, which is coming in at the top of the plug, right? Like, so we're talking here, we then are getting disadvantage on sound-based perception. And maybe if we want to do perception at all, because there's mists, maybe the cultist broke some pipes or something happened in a fight, and there's water and mist and fog rolling in. Maybe one floor, maybe we make floor 3, disadvantage on perception. Maybe everyone is blind and deaf because something happened here. And so now we have... Do you want to put a couple Sahagin in here to make a spicy combat? Maybe. Remember that your casters are really going to get messed over if they're deaf. Well, depending, but generally. And even your fighters if they're blind. Though we could make level 3 a trap, or rather a hazard place. How do they navigate if they're blind and deaf by mist and steam? How do they navigate through and through the pipes or the runes, like all these pipes with runes and stuff on them? How do they not slip on something, or maybe they find out that there's an ambush waiting for them? Hazards and traps are their own encounters. It doesn't always have to be goblins and Sahagin trying to kill them with spears and tridents and swords. So we have a possible actual sneaking mission or physical encounter. Level 2, we have a social encounter, and we can fill in level 2 with decoration. Level 2 could be its own looking place. Maybe this is a blue dragon theme floor, and so there's mosaics and there's things to blue dragons. Well, then we come up to level 3, and this is like the processing floor. This is where whatever magical process happens, something has gone wrong, and the whole place is tough to navigate. Well, you have a maze of pipes. They have to navigate and maze themselves. Now, here's where you can really have some fun and build the lore. The salt is extracted from somewhere. Maybe this floor is where the water runs through the pipes. The pipes have these runes or whatever written on them. There's a machine, I don't know, dragons and magic. That extracts the salt. And so there's salt piles. Or let's say if we want to make a hazardous maze, if they touch a section of the maze, then they might take exhaustion damage or con damage or hit point damage because the magic's malfunctioning and it pulls the salt from their bodies. And I don't think anyone's carrying around, a 2 liter of Brondo, because Brondo has what plants crave. It has electrolytes. What are electrolytes? Salt. Gatorade is sweetened salt water. And so there's also salt piles. This is where it was collected to be, shipped off. Maybe that's their currency. Maybe that's how these people do trade with the outside world via some sort of agent. If it's not the skeletal guy, because there are some superstitious things like salt and ghosts or whatever don't mix. Maybe they do. I don't know. This is your world. But here you have a hazardous maze where they're kind of going through the fog and the mist and they're blind or deaf. And not only are they learning how the desalination process happens, they might get exposed to it. And then if they took the time to go into the fields The Sahagin came through, and the Sahagin had extra salt on them. They might have even covered themselves in salt. They were able to pass through the pipes because the pipes took the excess salt when they were rushing through. And so the Sahagin came out okay. They didn't have the salt pulled from their bodies. And oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. You're the best DM ever. Woo woo. Yeah, you're the best. Legendaries drop 1 in 20 packs. Oh, okay. Which is the worst odds in the game. You know how to play Magic. If you know how to play Magic, Hearthstone is child's play. Yeah, it is a simplistic version. I know it still has its level of fun. I'm not going to poo-poo on it, but yeah, Magic is more complex than Hearthstone. There we go. We'll call this the blue level. Level 4. This is the bronze level, right? It was made by 2 dragons. You might have even seen Grandpappy Blue and Grandpappy Bronze and the burial mounds. Here we go. What's going to happen in the bronze level? Maybe nothing. Maybe it's pure art and decoration. It's a place for the villagers to come and do some religious worship. If they choose to worship here and not on the blue level, maybe on both. If you want to tempt your players to steal something for good or bad, there could be a lot of holy artifacts or relics here that can be stolen. Precious metals, pieces of art, pieces of dragon that can have value, things along those lines. So we can have this be like a temptation level. Do you want to throw in a mimic as a protector or a shield guardian? Sure. Keep in mind though, the Sahagin have already passed through this level. Why didn't the shield guardian go off? And which, by the way, on the stairs leading up to the spire, there might be some guards, or there might even be a couple dead bodies and a fallen shield guardian to show that yes, things happened. Or if you want to set a moral point for your players, they walk into the room and there's a Sahagin that is currently being chewed up by a mimic that's still in animated form. Maybe we shouldn't touch the treasure chests up here. Maybe there's been other people who've tried to break in here and steal their things, and these half-dragons, dragonborn, whatever, have gotten pretty sick and tired of it, but they know exactly what to do to trap petty adventurers who want to steal their stuff. Wink. And then we finally come up and we have the fight with the cult leader, right? So maybe on the blue level, yeah, the Speak with Survival, this is a social interaction. We have a moral interaction. We have a hazard or a trap interaction. We have a stealth or a combat interaction of a lower level. Now we get to the boss fight. Now you paint the scene and you say, all right, you're in the spire. Did any of you play, whatever, it's green, I guess. Did any of you play Legend of Zelda Wind Waker? I won't give, I'm not going to spoil too much. You know, there's a lot of water in that game. At the end of the game, you take place in a very watery arena where the entire outside area of the arena is it's like a big waterfall. And so, aside from... This is not the best spray paint job. Do not expect me to go tagging with you guys on some random night in the city that you live. So you have this, we come back over, whatever, we're using green, I'll stick with green. You know, the stairs come up. Maybe there's even a fight at the top of the stairs with Sahagin. This could even be a tube, so they wouldn't necessarily have seen you coming, and you could ambush them. So you come in, and sure enough, there's a big mean Sahagin person. There's his fins on the side of his face. Isn't that lovely? And then there is a, here's a Dragonborn person. Oh no, help me, please. And the boss can have minions. The boss doesn't have to have minions. There could be more guards. The boss might be able to use magic. But you can see as you're describing it, right? All around the top are kind of like these runes written in ancient Draconic that you've strewn throughout the place. And the water is pouring in like a sieve from these different runes. And and remember, you're telling a story. It smells like the sea. It smells like salt water. You see fish every now and again, large or whatever, just sort of like flop down. And the water itself, right? It's in waterfalls, but really there's a platform, a smaller platform inside your boss arena. So all of this here, if you fall down that, you're getting sucked into the desalination plant, and you're not gonna live. And so here you have your big bad guy. Do you want him to have a monologue? Do you want him to be powerful? Do you want to have... maybe you even say that, unlike all the other floors, this is completely serene, as if the water is flowing from behind soundproof glass. It's as quiet as the depths of the sea, or something along those lines. You can only hear a faint rumbling from down below, where all these intake pipes that go down to that level 3 desalinization area are. And so maybe you can speak normally, hear normally, cast normally, and so it's going to be a straight-up fight. And then here we have our intrepid party of heroes coming in, facing down a foreign enemy they've never heard of or seen. What can he do? What's going on? Does the enemy have a cool trick where he can swim through waterfalls and not really teleport, but kind of teleport around the stage? And how are the players going to tilt the combat in their advantage when the boss can seemingly use the environment and his magic and physical capabilities? That's up to your players. Maybe you gave him a MacGuffin in the village. Maybe they found an old family sword in the graveyard. Maybe something like this has happened before, and in the aquaponics they had anti-Sahagin powder. I don't know. If you think that something needs tilted one way or the other, tilt it. Use the environment for beautification purposes, but also for practical purposes, and create a threat. Not only are you threatened by the boss character, maybe you're morally threatened because you don't want to throw a fireball and toast the hostage. An evil party might, but again, you're accounting for that. Or can your players use the environment too? What if he goes in and one of them says, "I have a great idea. I'm gonna use an ice power and try and freeze him." Hey, okay, maybe that works. Heck, maybe that one shot kills the boss, but you gave it to him because they were clever, and they had great role playing leading up to this point, right? The boss gets sucked down into the drain. Now, will he live to menace him again? Maybe. I don't know. It's a boss monster. It's up to you. But there we go. Hey, we did it. We made a dungeon. Dun da da da. That took about 2 hours. But hopefully this makes sense for you all. Hopefully this inspires you. Hopefully this gets you thinking. All of this was just done. There's no grand campaign book to look back on. I'm not rehashing a dungeon that I've made before. I made these pen sketches like an hour before I went on air with you all, just so I had a frame of reference and I could make sure that I'm not stumbling over my own words. This is all of this. It makes sense. It creates a nice epic encounter, even if it's not epic in level and mechanics. Will your players talk about a dungeon like this for, days, weeks, months, years to come? Hopefully so. And also, don't forget to give them that alternative way out if they didn't get that crystal wheel for whatever special bonus action. Maybe the Sahagin guy drops maybe he drops something like a Tensor's floating disk generator, right? Because they wanted to haul out a bunch of loot or something. And then you just sort of give them like a... on their way down, if they don't want to give up the crystal wheel or they don't have it to give to the supernatural entity, they just kind of have like a little Goonies water slide, right? As they like slip slide their way down and kind of like skitter across the lake to get back to the city. Ta-da! Thank you. I'm not that haughty. This is a thrown together dungeon. If it makes sense, you still have to apply the stats. You have to make the grid. Really, I'm hoping that I'm just planting seeds in your imagination. But I need something to drink. I've been talking a lot, if that's not clear, and I'm gonna get up and stretch my legs too. So I'm gonna go AFK, and I'll be back, and then we'll finish up with whatever you want to talk about. Not that we couldn't have been doing that.